Scott, I'm excited to be here.
Me too.
For our audience, if you don't know, we have several things in common. And this is the first time we've met in person, right?
Right. We met virtually because you visited our students at the governor's school, South Carolina Governor's School, 2 years. I looked up, it was 2 years ago. It was February 2021.
Yeah. So both Scott and I still consider myself a teacher, although I'm not in the classroom. So we're both teachers, writers, and cyclists. So that's why I was so pumped when this book came out. So I'm really excited to talk to you, not only about writing, but riding.
That's right.
As well. I have to enunciate tonight, I think. So for those joining us, why don't we just start with a little synopsis, if you will, of this book?
First of all, thanks. I want to thank Malaprops for having us. Malaprops has always been really good to me with having me up for things, and I really appreciate it. And thank you. I appreciate it. I know you had a little bit of a drive to get here, so I appreciate it. It's really nice. I'm a big fan of Even As We Breathe, so I got my copy of it back. Okay, Hammerhead Chronicles. Synopsis. Well, let me say this in terms of a synopsis: is that there were two things I wanted to do when I started to sit down to write this book, and one was I wanted to write a book that had multiple narrators. I'm a big fan of that. I've been a fan of that since I was in Dr. Dooley's class at dear old Wofford College. There's an alum sitting out here, and read As I Lay Dying, and all those multiple narrators, the voices keep bouncing back and forth, moving the story forward. I said, I want to do that. And then I wanted to write a book that had cycling in it, because now you do mostly mountain biking.
Mostly, yeah. I do some road biking, but I do mostly mountain biking.
See, I've never done mountain biking.
Oh.
Because, because most mountain bikers I met have broken multiple bones in their body.
Details.
And I'm like, I don't want to break my bones, you know? But anyway, I wanted to write a book that had cycling in it. And actually, the third thing I wanted to do is I wanted to satirize some things about the South because the South deserves some satirizing. So, here and there. So that was the plan. So I'd had this first line in my head, and my first lines usually don't remain first lines, but this first line I had in my head, it was like his wife dies and he buys. Your wife dies and you buy an expensive bicycle. And I thought that's I'm always on the lookout for first lines. I thought that's a first line. So I've got this character who's one of the voices in the novel, whose soon to be ex-wife passes away, and sort of as a way of moving on, getting through things, moving through life, he starts cycling. And there's all these other stories from the other narrators that sort of revolve around him, and pick or look at certain aspects of the South and how we tend to think about things and how we tend to react to things. And they tell the story, they move the story along. So if there's a main character, it's Claude, the cyclist, and then there's all these other people revolving around him, one of which is his deceased wife, who narrates from the great beyond, wherever that is, and his daughter and his best friend Samuel, and there's a bookstore in there that
it is not like Malaprop.
No. But I think, I don't know if you do this, but when you write fiction, you can do those things. You can say, I want to write a book that has this in it and this in it and this in it, and I want to see if I can make a story around that. So you get to bring all these things in. So I brought in a bookstore, and I wanted the bookstore to be owned by these twins who are racist and gay, and they run a business out of the back selling Confederate branded stuff, let's just say. And we'll leave it at that for the audience. But you get to build a world, and that's the fun part about writing is you get to build a world. You get to say, these are the people that are going to populate this world, and this is where they live, and this is where they relate to each other, and you get to play in that sandbox, and it's so much fun. I don't know if that was a good summary of the book or not, but
Yeah,
it's hard. This was hard. It would be hard to say this is the plot line of this book, because it's more like these voices that just moves us through the lives of these characters.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you're creating a world where they're all connected, and in surprising ways, they are connected. You brought up the twins, and I remember the first time I read about the twins, I laughed out loud in the bed. I was like reading in the bed and laughed out loud. My husband kind of looked at me because I don't laugh out loud, hardly ever with movies or with books. But these are just some really well-developed characters.
No thanks.
And I want to get to the individual characters in a second, but you mentioned that you wanted to write about cycling, and you had me hooked when you described how it feels on your body to first start riding a road bike. So I'm curious, when you say you wanted to write about cycling, what was it about cycling that inspired you, I guess?
Several things. Cycling, and I don't know if anybody here or out there cycles, but it's for a lot of people it's therapeutic. You get in this zone where your body's working underneath you, and your legs are working, and your brain kind of, I don't know what it releases, but I do a lot of writing while I'm writing.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking through characters and plots and things like that, and that's fun. And then there's the whole subculture of cycling, with the people who are really good at it and the people who are not so good, and the people who are kind of in the middle, and the clothes you wear, and the money you can spend on your computer or your gloves. I got to have those gloves because I got a better grip on the way you can take 3 ounces off. I put on a different bracket on the back, and all this kind of stuff. So there's this whole subculture of cycling, and then I was first. Well, I grew up as a kid riding a bicycle, but I really loved. Years and years ago, started watching the Tour on TV and seeing those sort of, I guess in this now, a lot of them were pharmaceutically enhanced, but they're just kind of alien athletes that they can ride these mountains that go like this. So I love it. When I started cycling, I just loved getting out and just getting in the zone and just thinking through a short story I was writing, and just pedaling, and just suddenly looking down and go, I've gone 15 miles. I haven't thought about it. It's just, I don't know. And I think I tell my students at the governor's school, you need to, if you want to write about things that you're obsessed with, and write about things that are important to you. And that was just a small thing that I was kind of obsessed with at one point, until I had to get an ankle fused a couple of times. So I haven't ridden as much lately, but yeah, I just do you have, I don't mountain bike, so I don't know. That's a lot more. You're doing a lot more technical stuff.
Yeah, I can't zone out for 15 miles in the live. But it is similar. I actually have said the same phrase to people, that I write and ride at the same time. And it's something about that motion, because I think really great literature moves, right? It has that energy. And, the other thing is you can't write anything down when you're, right. So I will work through lines over and over again.
Just keep repeating.
Yeah. And so I don't forget it. Right.
Right.
So by the time that I can stop and put it in my phone as a note or something, it's a really refined, I've edited it, as I have been writing. So I enjoy that. And then of course, the other aspect of mountain biking is that I'm in the woods, and that really informs a lot of my writing.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I think I wrote, I described this, is that I used to run a lot, and running, it to me, changes in elevation when you're running. You see it, and you kind of pounding on the pavement, and you feel it a little bit, but it's not when you're on a bicycle and you change from like 1 or 2 degrees, you feel it like suddenly you feel like you're pedaling in mud. And I just thought that was an interesting idea, that you feel the topography of where you're going. And and in this book, Claude, the main character, one of the things that he's obsessed with is getting up this particular mountain. And I write it as this mountain near Greenville, and it's Paris Mountain, and it's not a hard climb, but for somebody like him, it would be a hard climb, and that turns out to be an important place because there's an accident on that mountain, and he's obsessed with this female cyclist that he never gets to meet. He follows her, and that gets him in some trouble too.
I like that she was faster than him.
Oh yeah,
I appreciated that as a female cyclist.
Well, personal experience. Get dusted by a lot of people when I'm cycling.
So, what's unique about this book too is one of your characters is, as you mentioned, speaking to us from the great beyond.
Wherever that is.
Wherever that is. What led you to that decision? I found that was something we, of course, rarely see, right?
Probably 2 things. One is that I wanted to see if I could do it, which I think is, I like to set up challenges when I sit down and write. It's like, I want to see if I can make this happen. But the other thing is real, I don't want to get in the creative writing weeds, but I felt like I needed a more omniscient narrator but still a first person voice.
Oh.
So it's first person. Peg is up in wherever, but she can see everything that's happening. So she can move the story forward by seeing what's going on in this person's house or what's going on in this person's house. So she sees all from where she is. So it was kind of a little bit of a trick to have a first person narrator, but as actually omniscient and seeing everything, which I thought might be fun to play with.
Yeah. Really enjoyed her experience because we don't get any kind of sense of what the great beyond is or isn't, so much as like being in that moment. And it kind of freaked me out to think about, like, what if this is what happens and we were forced to watch everybody we know? How terrible. But
well, it's fun to do too, though. I mean, it was like, it's just say, and that's that world building. You go, well, what would it be like if somebody was in wherever this place is and watching, unable to change anything, and unable to react really to it, just kind of suspended there watching. And I thought that would be interesting for a character, and also you don't get to write dead characters much, so
so Peg is Claude's ex-wife who's passed on, but there are from my perspective as a reader, there were some potential multiple love interests for Claude. Like, there were a couple of moments where I thought things were going to go different ways. I don't want to give any spoilers, but because I get so much grief about the characters in my book not getting together at the end, I want to know, did you grapple with Claude's love life?
No. I think my 90-year-old father, who is recovering from COVID, is watching, and he's never forgiven me for not getting Claude together with one particular person.
Really?
And he keeps going, oh, why didn't he, and I'm going,
I think I know who he's talking about. I'm with you, Dad.
you go write your novel, Mom. But yeah, he's never forgiven me for not having Claude have any kind of connection with that person. So no, I didn't. I think one thing I try to do is offer surprises or take you down a path that you might not be expecting. So the fact when I hear somebody say, I wanted that to happen and I didn't make it happen, that actually makes me feel pretty good, because it went another direction. And I think as if you're creating a plot, that's an important thing to think about. If you go the expected route, then what are you giving the reader? You're giving them their expectations. And I don't know, you never know what to give away. I thought what Peg saw happen might be the best thing dramatically when her ex-husband finds somebody. So,
I agree.
We'll just leave it.
Well, yes.
For all this
To read,
massive,
to find
for all
out.
these people like are dialing up bookshop.org right now, ordering their copies.
So did any of the characters surprise you when you started writing them? But I've had characters change my whole plot line before.
Oh yeah. Samuel changed, because I wasn't real sure what I was going to do with him. Samuel is Claude teaches at a college, and Samuel is his colleague. And Samuel lives on his own, and he's had a run-in. Samuel is a Black character, and he's had a run-in with the owners of the bookstore, and he decides to gain some revenge on them.
It is wonderful too.
And I wasn't sure how to do that. Well, I mean, that's no reason to keep it. He does it. He does it with rats. He's got a infestation of very large rats in his attic, and he decides to unleash them, capture as many as he can, unleash them on the bookstore. So I didn't know. I thought, and here's the weird thing about writing fiction. First of all, pure fiction, I don't think exists. You're always stealing from the world. You're taking something, and there's that old creative writing thing that says write what you know, and I think you got to write what you know well enough to lie about. So I had a buddy who went a buddy in high school, and when he moved into his dorm in college, he heard something one night above the dorm, just up in the ceiling doing this, and he went up there and looked, and there was these huge rats. I remember that. And then I had a writer friend who told me a story, who was just a wonderful guy, wonderful character. He said he got mad at somebody who owned a store out in the country, so he started capturing field mice and letting them go behind the store. So I put those two things together and created this revenge plot for Samuel. So, but I wasn't sure where it was going to go once I did that, and that surprised me, that kind of where that went. Yeah, some of it I don't. Do you outline?
I do to a certain extent. It always changes, but I have to have some kind of structure.
Yeah.
But like with Even As We Breathe, a major plot line completely shifted.
Yeah. I don't really outline. I kind of have a general idea. I've always been a fan of John Irving, and Irving always says he knows what the last line of the book is going to be before he sits down to write the first line. So I knew where I wanted to end this book. I knew that scene, that was always going to be the end. So I was trying to figure out how to get there. So that's everything kind of does this to get to that point. But but that plot line, that character changed a lot as I was writing.
Well, how about you read something?
Let me read. I just read the first chapter. How about that? The Claude chapter. Yeah, let me read that because this is sort of gets you started. And Claude, I mentioned that first line that I'd had in my head for so long. I know we're in Asheville, but if anybody's listening in Greenville, you know that this cycling shop is you'll recognize it because it's the old shop that used to be on Pleasantburg Drive. Anyways, this is the first chapter. This is Claude chapter. Your wife dies and you buy an expensive foreign bicycle. And yes, you know how that sounds, how cold and borderline brutal, how it possesses not even the tiniest speck of compassion. But you have been lusting after a bicycle much longer than she has been dying. And the two events collide on a Thursday evening in late summer. Call it synchronicity, call it whatever you want, except don't call it unfeeling. Because she isn't really your wife when she passes away. Okay, technically, maybe on paper Peg is, but she is a month and a day from becoming your official ex-wife. What with South Carolina's odd year-long waiting, contemplating, second-guessing period after you separate. The two of you are, as they say, estranged. Add to that, you are completely out of shape, a physical wreck. Of all the things that flutter in and out of Peg's cloudy brain during these last cloudy weeks, you hope one scrap of information that lodges in her mind is the fact that you're going to buy a bike no matter what happens, and she is okay with it. On that Thursday, you walk through the door of the only bicycle store you were familiar with, the one housed in a rusting Quonset hut on Pleasantburg Drive. The fact that it's on a pleasant drive you consider a good omen, though you are not a big believer in signs. You walk up to the first person you spot, a beanpole thin young man, a kid, maybe 25 tops. His back is to you, but you can tell everything about this kid screams aerodynamic. Hair buzzed to a bristled fuzz, t-shirt wrapping him like a second skin, body fat of a splinter, and his legs shaved smooth like a runway model's. I'm here to buy a bike, you say, and he pulls his attention away from the display of rubber tire tubes and wheel rims to scan your worth, not as a consumer, but as a potential cyclist. What stands before him is a man rounding the horn into his 50s, a man with a wealth of questionable genetic bequests from both sides of his family, doughy love handles and moderate hypertension from his father, chronic creaky knees and slightly bowed legs from his mother. If the kid possesses the ability to look even further back, Arrow Boy might discover the medical resumes of your grandparents and aunts and uncles, checked with everything from childhood rickets to a third cousin on your father's side, born with the 4 long fingers on each hand, webbed tightly together, a cousin who, at a young, impressionable age, was given the unfortunate but apropos nickname of Mittens. You have seen black and white pictures of Cousin Mittens taped into dusty family albums, him smiling and waving at the camera with his boxed hands. You have always worried when that strand of DNA would worm its way back onto the branches of the family tree. Looking for something easy to get around on, I'm guessing? Arrow Boy asked confidently, like some sort of bicycle profiler. His nasally voice is pitch high. You know you can't call him Arrow Boy, so you ask his name. TJ, he says, and you think, well, of course you're a TJ. Even your name is aerodynamic. You talk and words pour out like desperate escapees. Well, TJ, let me tell you what I want. I want a fast bike. I want a bike like I see on television, the Tour. That's what I want, not walking out until I get it. And at that point, you punctuate your speech with action. You lay your credit card on the glass top counter above the electrolyte powders and the caffeine beans and the energy bars and the bullet-like canisters of compressed air. The card floats like magic on the glass. The scene is cinematic, one you scripted in your head that morning, even practiced. You whipping out a credit card and tossing it on the counter like a poker shark, flipping his final ace onto a giant pot. Whatever you say, TJ doesn't take his eyes off the credit card. TJ, this will be the easiest sale you make today, you say. I hope you work on commission. Set me up. And the two of you stroll into the maze of wheels and spokes and carbon frames and naked handlebars hanging from the Quonset hut's rafters, TJ leading the way like a frontier guide into your brand new wilderness.
I know TJ. I know a few TJs.
They're always the guys in bike shops.
Oh man, that was, when I first started writing, that I was so intimidated to walk into a bike shop because depending on where you go, they'll start talking very technical. But there are some really great bike shops like pitch motion makers who will take good care of you and don't treat you like a fool.
Well, that cycling shop is no longer in business, but they were great. They were really great. But that's like, you're right. You go in there and it's like the subculture. I tell you, it's like, they start asking questions to gauge where you are on the, and you just, I just want to ride a bike.
Exactly. So we got a few more minutes before we take questions. And I wanted to ask you, as a teacher, if your experience with young people influences how you write on a couple of different levels. So you have the character of Claude's daughter, Marlene, in the book, and she's a teenager, and her boyfriend of sorts.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you if that influences how you write younger characters, but also if it influences how you write in general, because you are used to teaching the literature. Do you ever think about how your books would be taught or bring any of the teaching into your own writing?
Oh, that's a great question. I know a lot of readers who say they can't write and teach at the same time, and I've never felt that. I guess never had the opportunity to feel that. But now that you've quit teaching, now that you've retired, how does that feel? No, but the one thing that always sticks out is you go, I better be practicing what I teach, but what I preach when I'm teaching. Like, so I teach creative writing at the South Carolina Government School for the Arts, and an alumni sitting here tonight. and so you sit there and you go, like that question you asked about Peg, and I was why put her up there? Right. And I was talking about omniscience, and I think, well, that's something you would discuss in class, that you need somebody who can see these things to keep the plot going, because one of the drawbacks of first person narration is that person's got to be there, right? So I do have that little voice in my head going, well, you're preaching these things to these students. You better show them that you can do that. So it's a motivational thing more than anything. But it's I don't really think about what it might be like to have books taught. I mean, some of my stuff is, I know the short story collection has been taught a couple of times, and the other thing is that's really scary too.
It is, yeah.
Because this class of people is going to be reading this and going, this is terrible. This is so it's an intimidating thing too. But no, as far as me relating to students, and the other thing is that because I'm teaching a very specific creative writing class, I can talk to them about the things that I'm going through, like whether it's getting 4 rejection emails in a day, or how to revise, or so we can talk about this. We have similar experiences, or they're starting to have experiences that I've had for a number of years, so we can talk about that. Yeah. So I didn't early on. I didn't like to talk about what I was working on with students, but I've changed over the years. I'm doing that a little bit more these days, because I think from what they're telling me, they find it valuable to know that this is what happens sometimes out there in the writing world, and the publishing world, and the revising world, and keep on listing those worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think students really gain a lot from knowing the reality of all things, right? Like, I was just talking to my husband, who also is in education, in our dream world, in our dream school, if we could just teach writing like we're doing writing workshops, and teach literature separate like we're doing a book club, that's really all we should be doing, I think, to not kill literature.
You need to come. Will you talk to my students? I mean, that's what I do. I mean, I got that. I mean, it's a nice situation, because I get to talk about those things every day.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Have your students read this book or other books? Do you get comments from them?
Yeah. I mean, they do, and a lot of times they won't tell you they're reading it,
Yeah.
But lately, the one that I've got a memoir that I wrote, and a couple of my students have come up and say, "Really? This is what happened?"
Oh yeah, that's different.
Yeah,
because it's a memoir. Oh, yeah.
right. So that's a little bit, yeah. I was like, yeah, but I teach nonfiction, so that's actually good for them to see that at a certain, here's your story, and you got to tell it the best way you know how, and as honestly as you know how, and make it into a story that can translate to a reader, can bridge that distance.
So you said when we started that this book is a little bit of a commentary in parts on the South. So what message do you have for the 2023 South?
I think you've already hit on it a little bit. Is that one thing that happens in this book is that people find out they're connected, whether they want to be connected or not. And I think that one of the thematic threads that may come out of this is, with all of our differences, we may not be that far apart. So some of the characters, and without giving away the plot or anything, some of the characters are connected and didn't realize it, and it turns out they may be okay with it. They may go, okay, this may not be as bad as we thought. So yeah, so I think, in not to get too pedantic, but it's about connections, because I think that's, I grew up in the South. I grew up in South Carolina, and I suffer from that disease of going, if you give me you introduce me to somebody that's a stranger that grew up in South Carolina, give me about 5 questions and I'll find you. We know 3 are the same people. It's the Kevin Bacon thing on steroids. We're only 3 or 4 degrees connected. So, that was a kind of a thing, is that, trying to say, start out with these people that seem to be just so wildly different. And as the story moves forward, just keep bringing them closer and closer together until at the end. I mean, there's a scene at the end where there's a bar in this book that's based on a bar that's near my house in beautiful downtown Sans Souci. And all the characters are there at the bar. And you would have never thought, hopefully at the beginning of the book, that all those characters would be sitting there at a table at this bar. So I think that's what I was trying to do, is, but is also to create some humor and create some situations that might be funny as these people keep coming together.
Absolutely. Well, I think right about now we are going to take questions. So if there are questions in the house and then online, Stephanie is.
And if not, we've got plenty more.
Oh yeah, we can talk about all kinds of things.
Danny.
All right. I obviously just bought the book, so I don't know what it's about, but I just love your rats as revenge. I think it is so creative. As I was driving here, there was a bit on the news about some jerk who went and who lost an election, and he went and he shut up a lot.
I heard the same story on it.
Of the people who won somewhere in New Mexico. And I'm thinking, rats, that is so clever. And by the way, pretty European, where, just because they don't have guns over there does not mean that they don't.
There's still revenge.
Use what you got.
So I can't wait to find out how that works.
Yeah, it was, and again, I'm kind of at the point where I've never been one of those writers that believes, I like to have fun when I'm creating something. And so I don't like to sit there and go, oh, I hate writing. I like building the world, and I like thinking of things like that. I like that there's other parts of writing that are not so good, like the rejection and trying to get it right and not being able to get it right. But thinking that up was fun. And like I said, I stole some ideas, but then I started telling the lies around it, and the biggest thing is, hopefully you'll read it and you'll see. The biggest thing is, did it work? Because it gets a little nuts with the rats, and you're kind of going, I hope this is believable. And that's when you have people that you trust read it, and people who will give you their honest opinions and say, yeah, you pulled that off. Yeah, that could happen. I'm believing that. It's crazy, it's nuts, but I believe it. Where's your accent from?
Hey, where's your accent from?
Right here in South Carolina.
Okay, good for you.
That's a great accent. I love it.
So a question about process. What is the editing process like for the two of you, in the sense that drafts, early drafts, feedback, you a good recipient? Feedback?
Yeah, so I will say, this goes back to teaching experience, that I've got to walk the talk,
Yeah.
right? So I have made myself be a good recipient of feedback because I had expected it of all my students. But part of that comes with taking feedback from people you trust, right? So it's a lot easier to be good with feedback if you trust the people who are giving it to you. And so I would say I'm really receptive to feedback. The editing process, nothing in my life is one way all the time. So it always changes. But for example, the book I'm working on right now, I like to write as much as I can and get it out there. But when I feel like I need to stop and I'm not sure where I'm going, then I like to go back and spend some time editing in that process. Not because I think I'm going to get the final draft before I finish the book, but I like the process of refining as I go, because it also kind of informs where I'm headed. So I edit as I go a little bit. I don't show my work to a lot of people in the process. I do go to the writers workshop in Hyman, Kentucky, the Appalachian Writers Workshop, and I trust that process. And so those people have seen my work usually, but few other people have in process. My husband doesn't read my work. I'm always envious of writers who have spouses that read their work and give them feedback. My husband does not read. Sometimes even when it's published, he doesn't read my work. So he did read my novel. That was good. So yeah, a lot of it is on me until I feel like it's ready to share. Yeah.
I normally I have to finish a draft before I go back and rewrite. Now I say that, but then during the writing process, when you sit down the next day after a day of writing the previous day, you'll read into the new part. So you might change a thing here or there, but I usually, before I do any major surgery, I have to do a full draft. And I've always kind of been that way. This book was different though. Because I worked on it. I didn't write it. There's 7 different voices in this book, 7 different. And so I didn't write it. I wrote it. I'd start with Claude. I went, well, I think it's time for this person. I think it's time for this person. I just tried to tell the story by kind of instinctively saying it's time to get this person in. Then I went back and I took all the 7 voices, put them in a separate file, and then read it through.
Oh.
So I could make sure the voices, it sound consistent. So then I went and broke them back apart and then put them back in place, and then went through it and went, well, that can't work because that person couldn't have possibly known that yet. So I moved it backwards, and it was weird. But I'll do this real quickly, is that this book was taken by this wonderful tiny little press in North Georgia, University of North Georgia Press, in January of 2020. And I don't know if you remember what happened shortly thereafter.
just a little. I'm being silly.
Oh, run out of time.
No,
No, she
no,
said
I
she
yeah, I kinda
remembers.
remember.
Oh,
I thought she was saying time.
Oh, I thought you were telling me to shut up. Oh, that's not the signal for shut up. Okay. No. Yeah, so I sent, they took it, and so then I did a major rewrite with the editor there, the publisher and the editor there, and great suggestions and things, and got it. And like I said, I'm satirizing some things, and I've got these voices are all different types of characters, right? So then I was waiting for cover ideas, and we were doing all this, and a new associate editor came in who was younger and came in and read it and went, "There's no way we can publish this book. We can't do this. This is not going to work. You pushed it too far." And of course I was like, "By God, it's my vision." Or I said that to myself. I didn't say that to them. But I was really upset. I'm upset because I was like, "Oh, what did I do wrong?" And they gave it to a third-party reader, which publishing houses now have third-party readers a lot of times, or sensitivity readers, they call them. So the sensitivity reader read it, and the sensitivity meter went, "Hey, over here." So I got a report back from the sensitivity reader, and it was, I read it all the way through. I read the book with the comments, and I just went, "Ugh," like it just gutted me. So I didn't know what to do. And the press said, "Well, we'll give you two options. We can just stop here, and we'll, no harm, no foul. We can go our separate ways, or you can rewrite the book." And I said, I thought about it. I talked to Shannon about it, and I said, I didn't know what to do. I really mulled it over, and I finally decided I'm going to rewrite it. So I didn't look at that report again. I said, I get it. I understand what you're saying. So I went through and rewrote it. And the lesson, the thing that I've talked to my students about is it got better. They were right.
Yeah.
They were right. And I had taken tonal things in wrong, and it was mostly like language nuances and things like that. So when I went through it and changed it, it got to be a better novel. And now their press is the biggest advocates for me. I mean, it's been great.
Yeah.
But it was a good experience to go through. That it can get a lot better even after you think it's done.
Yeah.
And when somebody comes in and says, "Think about this," so
Yeah.
I appreciated that.
Yeah, it can be really helpful to work with those editors, but that triggered something in my brain. I have found that I have agonized through editorial comments more on very short pieces than longer pieces. So like I did a 300-word something for a magazine I will not name. And I wanted to strangle somebody.
They put you through the ringer.
Like, I was
for
like,
your 300
I
words.
was like, y'all, this is like, what else it's funny, but with the whole novel, I think because we're so invested, it's worth the pain.
Well, it got better, and I appreciated that. It was not an easy process to go through, because that when you think you've got it where you want it, and it's not my first rodeo.
Right.
So I thought, it's where I need it to be, and then going through it that time and dialing back on these things that, just dialogue shades here and there, just descriptions here and there, I think it got to be a better book, and I appreciated that process. Ultimately, it wasn't fun when I was going through it, but I appreciated it.
So glad you shared that, because not every story is a rosy editorial experience.
No.
And so it's really very grounding to hear that.
Well, and it would have been easy to go, screw, I'm going to try to sell it somewhere else, but I think having some smarter, saner people around you to say, maybe you should think about this, was what really helped me out in that case.
what were your influences in terms of satire? Or did you have any touchstones for satire? And if you didn't, for both of you, what are some of your writing influences?
Not particularly for satire, but I love writers who, I've always loved writers who tell these stories that exist on multiple levels. Like there's a lot of emotion, but there's also humor. Like you bring these things together. We were just talking about Charles Portis. I don't know if that's one of those Southern writers that
Charles who?
Portis, Portis. I mean, he's one of those that makes me want to just quit, because it's just so good. But there's, but he's not, I don't think you call it contemporary writer because he's not writing right now. Obviously, but yeah, I like those kind of books that exist on those multiple levels where you can have humor existing with turmoil and drama and do that kind of thing. Now, I mentioned John Irving earlier. I think Irving does that kind of thing. I think people like Lee Smith's always done that. She's one. I mean, I love Lee Smith's work because there's always something kind of wacky and funny happening amid all this other thing.
Yeah, I like writers who can balance. As we were talking about this, like the speed of the narrative, the energy of the narrative, also with this great literary beauty, right?
Yeah.
So we were also talking about Barbara Kingsolver and Demon Copperhead, and I told Scott, I said that's a writer that makes me want to quit. Like I can't do that ever, so I just quit. But
Don't quit.
no, okay, I'll try not to. But let's see, S.A. Cosby. Have you read his work?
Yeah.
I love the speed and the grit of it, but also there's like this literary quality to it that I just love, because I think it's because a lot of readers can attach to different points of it.
Yeah.
So that is inspirational, I think.
Well, I love anybody that just cares about language and cares about the sound and the music that comes through while telling a story. That's always that's fun to find.
Audience, do you have a couple of closing out questions? We have the old reliable. What are you working on now? Is that fair to you, Scott? You've just cranked out Hammerhead Chronicles.
You're great.
Are you taking a rest?
No, I have two other manuscripts that are looking for homes right now.
Talk to the camera when you say that.
Looking for homes. I write during the summers because I can't really. I have trouble during the school year creating new work. I usually revise during the school year. So my summer is, we'll have graduation on a Friday, and on Saturday I start my 1,000 words a day, and it's every day until school starts again. So I'm trying to figure. I've got a couple of ideas. I'm trying to figure out what's going to be the summer project right now. But like I said, I've got a new book of stories coming out in the fall. And I've got to be doing some rewriting on that in February, March, I think, coming out from Vine Leaves Press, that people who did the memoir. So I'll be working on that. But when summer hits, I'm off to the races with something. I don't know what it's going to be yet. I mean, like I said, I got some ideas.
Wonderful.
And you got a second novel you're working on.
I am working on the second novel, and it's contemporary setting with a female protagonist. So it's a shift from the first book, but it's set in Cherokee, and I'm mining some traditional Cherokee stories, origin stories for their values, and I'm overlaying them on a contemporary political context.
Okay.
So I may be kicked out of Cherokee. I'm not using real names, so no, but it's a lot of fun. But actually, it's also looking at really the motivation for it is, historically, traditionally, our tribe is matrilineal. We have great reverence for women and their roles in our community. But if you looked at our tribal council today, we have one woman on tribal council out of 12. And so that's a disconnect for me. So I was really looking at women's roles historically and then contemporary. And then, in the context of what's going on with women in America. That's all I'll say right now. So that's what's percolating right now. And hopefully we'll have a draft very soon.
Oh, good.
Because I quit my job. So
So are you writing full-time now?
I am. I left teaching at the end of last school year. Because I was like, Scott, I was writing in the summers.
Yeah.
I totally get that. And just was fortunate to be able to take a leap of faith. So far, it's working out. We'll check in next year.
Oh, I envy you. No, I love my students. Love.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Scott Gould.
Thank you.
Congratulations for the Hammerhead Chronicles. It's great to hear you talk about very candidly your process. And I always love an evocative reading, and I know the audience does too. So thank you for bringing that to us. We appreciate you and Annette being a part of Malaprop's community of authors. Thank you for joining us this evening, live audience and virtual audience. Please support our authors. Thank you so much. Have a great
Thank
evening.
you. Thank you.